I'm Shahar Azani with a special report for JBS from Israel. Today, we are right here in Jerusalem, outside of the headquarters of the Jewish Agency for Israel. The Jewish Agency is one of Israel's foremost institutions. Over the years, it has played a pivotal role in making Israel what it is today. Under the helm of former prisoner of Zion and head of the Jewish Agency, Natan Sharansky, the Jewish Agency was focused on maintaining connection with Jewish communities all over the world and in the United States. It also worked hard to fight the delegitimization efforts of Israel against Israel by working with emissaries in Jewish communities and throughout college campuses in the United States, supporting Jewish students. However, with Russia's war against the Ukraine and the worsening humanitarian situation on the ground, the Jewish Agency has gone back to its core of absorbing refugees and welcoming Aliyah of many thousands of Jewish families from the Ukraine, but not only from the Ukraine, also from Russia, with a campaign focused for that purpose, as you can see from the billboard outside of the Jewish Agency, enlisting the Israeli spirit for such support. To learn more about the Jewish Agency's activities in this regard and the Jewish Agency's activities in general, I'm pleased to be today with Yigal Palmor. Yigal Palmor is the head of the International Relations Department here at the Jewish Agency, as well as a special advisor on foreign issues to the chairperson of the Jewish Agency. Yigal, thank you so much for having us.
Thank you very much for coming over to the Jewish Agency, Shahar. It's good to have you here.
It's always a pleasure. So please tell us a little bit about what is the Jewish Agency doing at the moment vis-a-vis the Aliyah waves from the Ukraine, Russia, the refugees.
Yeah. Look, first of all, we all need to understand that this is an unprecedented situation for the whole world, but also for the Jewish Agency. We have never experienced Aliyah in wartime. We have never experienced Jewish communities in such a distress. There is no precedent to learn from. Throughout our nearly 90-year existence, we have never dealt with anything quite like it. So we are trying to learn while providing emergency solutions to the huge humanitarian problems that are being created as we speak in the field, in Ukraine and in the neighboring countries. Now, this is a general tragedy that affects all Ukrainians, but we at the Jewish Agency are mostly concerned with Ukrainian Jews who want to come to Israel. Obviously, we also care for others, and I will elaborate on that later, but what we do with priority is bring over to Israel those Ukrainians who are eligible for Aliyah under the law of return and who make it out of Ukraine to one of the neighboring countries. We have our own local staff in several cities in Ukraine. Our emissaries had to evacuate the country together with Israeli diplomats for security reasons.
So you used to have emissaries within the Ukraine?
We used to have Israeli emissaries within the Ukraine. They deployed and operated a large number of educational, cultural, and youth activities throughout the country.
On an ongoing basis?
On an ongoing basis, of course, going from summer camps to Hebrew lessons, to general Jewish and Israeli education, and so on, and of course Aliyah. But when the Israeli embassy had to leave Kiev for Lviv, and then from Lviv to Poland, our emissaries had to go with the diplomats for security reasons. But we still have local staff in Ukraine. They are handling evacuation operations.
From within the Ukraine even now?
From within the Ukraine for potential Olim. Not only, but let's focus on that for potential Olim. They handle their documentation because obviously in order to prove your eligibility for Aliyah, you need a whole bundle of documents. We are in negotiations with the Israeli government in order to alleviate the whole process and accelerate it. You can't demand the same kind of documentation and authentication for documents in time of war. So we need to, cut corners in many aspects, and we do that. We welcome and shelter those people who flee Ukraine, want to come to Israel, from the border to our special facilities that we have prepared in Poland, in Hungary, in Moldova, and in Romania. In Romania today, we are going to brief the Foreign Minister Yair Lapid, who is coming on a visit. We're going to show him one of the facilities. We already have approximately 1,000 Jews waiting for Aliyah in Romania. We are preparing their files. We are preparing them for Aliyah. We're booking flights, and they will all come to Israel, where they will be accompanied, first of all, by the Ministry of Aliyah and Absorption, of course, but also by Jewish agency staff who will accompany them psychologically and materially.
Yigal, when you're saying facilities in Romania, Moldova, and elsewhere, what does that mean, facilities? What do you have there on the ground?
Very concretely, that means hotel rooms that we have booked in several places in the capital cities of those countries, where people can be safe and wait for the flight to Israel. While they are there, we take care not only of their lodgings, but of course food, activities for children, because they need to be occupied and accompanied. And of course, we are now in cooperation with Beilinson Hospital, with the Rabin Medical Center and the Beilinson Hospital. We are bringing medical experts to those facilities to see how to provide medical and psychological care to the Olim who are in waiting, because you can understand that these are not normal Olim in the sense that they haven't just left their home and waiting to take a plane. They have fled their country in times of total catastrophe, total mayhem. They've left everything behind, and you can imagine their psychological or their mental situation. So they need to be accompanied and taken care of at all moments, and we are providing staff to do just that, again, in cooperation with Beilinson Hospital. There are other medical teams that will probably come to other facilities in other countries. We have a special platform for readiness in order to cope with times of stress. Unfortunately, Israel has a lot of experience in that field.
That's correct.
And we have thought about 2 or 3 years ago to create this platform. It's called J-Ready, through which we provide Israeli expertise to communities around the world. Now, this time it is highly needed in Ukraine or for Ukrainians in neighboring countries. So this platform has been activated in a specially focused manner for the Ukrainians who are fleeing the country and coming to Israel.
You're talking about the devastation, the wartime, and we can all see the images coming out of the Ukraine. But I want to stop for a minute and pause on the issue of communications. You mentioned people within the Ukraine working to find those people. How does that work? Like, how do you communicate? How do they communicate with those emissaries within the Ukraine? How do they know who to reach out to? How does that even work? And there was also a mention of a hotline of some sort. So
yes,
maybe you can elaborate on that.
So first of all, our staff, which consists of approximately 30 people in Ukraine, is very well rooted within the communities. Of course, they know the people, they know the community leadership, they know community activists, so they have contacts. We have distributed, once the war broke out, we distributed 17 GPS phones, satellite phones, to community leaders so that they can still be in contact if communication breaks down. And they are in touch with community organizations or with other Jewish organizations on the ground. We're not the only ones who are active in Ukraine, of course. And when we unite, when we join our forces, we're much better. So we organize, we collaborate, we cooperate, we do things together with other Jewish organizations, with a lot of Christian volunteers who help us in extracting Jews from Ukraine and helping them to find a shelter in our facilities or in facilities of other Jewish charities. That needs to be said. There are other Jewish charities that are also active. We are deeply grateful to those Christian volunteers who help us and who helped those Jews in distress. And so our network on the ground is what allows us to be so efficient, to be in touch with community leaders and with organizers, and so to take those Jews who want to come out on a very dangerous trip outside
I just have to ask you that you're talking about dangerous trip. There is an incredible, really tremendous level of commitment by your people on the ground. Yes. Haven't you received phone calls by them asking you to extract them outside of the Ukraine? I mean, where does that strength emanate from?
Yes, that's a good question. I've been asking that myself. And the devotion of this local staff is absolutely amazing. No, they haven't asked us to extract them. They are there working for the Jewish people and for the Jewish agency, and they haven't asked to leave the country. They are there doing their job, and that's extraordinary.
I guess it's part of the general resiliency of the Ukrainian people, as we've seen in the past 2 weeks with the Russian onslaught.
I think so. Now, you mentioned the hotline. I
Correct.
need to mention the hotline because
Yes.
as soon as the fighting broke out, we have set up with the Ministry of Absorption and with the IFCJ a special hotline for
International Fellowship of Christians and Jews.
Exactly. We have established this hotline with Ukrainian numbers and Israeli numbers for family members here who are worried, concerned, they want to know things, they want to inform us about their families. We have received to date approximately over 16,000 calls to that hotline. Approximately a quarter or a third of them have been interested in making Aliyah at once, and the others want to get relief or shelter, or they want to know how to organize themselves within the community. We are, of course, helping everyone get what they need as much as we can.
So the calls come here to the headquarters of the Jewish Agency?
All calls are, yes, they call here. We have what we call the global center of the Jewish Agency. In normal times, in peaceful times, it is a place, it is a call center which is manned by people who speak 7 languages and who respond to Aliyah requests from around the world. In many countries, we have a toll-free number that connects people directly to the global center. In other countries, the numbers doesn't really matter. There are people there who can answer your call 24/7 in 7 or 8 languages and who help you open an Aliyah file. Of course, we're talking now about emergencies. It's not about opening an Aliyah file and taking your time and go back and bring me documents. So we change the whole operating procedure. And in some cases, in many cases, I need to say that people have been, the calls have been directed to resilience experts because people are in distress, and what they really need is someone to talk to and someone to help them overcome the situation, the psychological situation. So we provide assistance, we provide Aliyah, we provide extraction, and we do all that without any previous experience because no one has a previous experience
during wartime.
That kind of situation.
You know, I'm listening to you very carefully, and I hear this wonderful balance. You put a lot of emphasis on emotional support for the people who come from there, not just the physical support for them. And that is really embedded in your strategy. Where does that come from?
As I said, Israel, unfortunately or not, has acquired a lot of practical experience in coping with extreme situations. Terror, war, again terror, rockets falling on your head, all sorts of extremely stressful situations that normal residents in the West have not experienced themselves unless they've been in a tour of duty in Iraq or Afghanistan. So based on this acquired experience, I think Israel ranks among the most developed nations in the world in terms of developing special methods in treating and handling stress situations and strengthening resilience and readiness. And that's why at the Jewish Agency we have created 3 years ago the special platform called J-Ready, which provides expertise and counsel on these areas precisely. And it was to communities, Jewish communities around the world. In certain cases, there are non-Jewish communities who became interested, and we share our knowledge, obviously. This became very much to the point once the pandemic broke out, because we didn't expect that to happen. We were thinking about more run-of-the-mill stress that you may encounter in daily life in certain countries more than others, in certain cities or certain neighborhoods, So with the pandemic, it turned out that our platform was there for communities from all over the world who needed not just to take advantage of these services and this expertise, but also to share it with the general community in their country. And that was really the finest hour of this platform from J-Ready.
Yeah.
And now we are using this platform for the Ukrainian crisis. And we're very happy that it's there, and it has already acquired a lot of knowledge and experience, and it's functioning marvelously.
You know, I just, for the sake of our viewers, you heard Yigal, and he says, we share this information on our capabilities naturally, of course. And there was no, just like we saw with the interview with the Israeli Foreign Ministry, the inherent attitude of sharing knowledge with the world is really part and parcel of who the Jewish agency and the Israeli institutions are, to make others benefit also from the experience. And I really think that, you know, it's worthwhile to pay attention to these, you know, under the radar but really meaningful statements.
Of course, it comes naturally. I mean, it's the natural thing to do when,
what so many
you
people
are in
missing about
contact
Israel.
with. I know, and of course, when you're in contact with Jewish communities, you don't need to explain it to anyone. It comes naturally,
to who we are.
even or mainly in times of war and extreme distress. And this was the case also in the time of the war in Yugoslavia. I don't know if you remember that, but we brought a lot of assistance and help to the Jewish community in Sarajevo, in Bosnia, and they shared it with the city, with the community, and that came naturally. It's obvious. And the Jewish agency welcomed, I think, about 100 children from Bosnia in its educational facilities here until the war subsided. And we took care of them. They weren't Jewish, but you know, that wasn't the point. It was obvious that we were there to help whoever needed it. It was the right thing to do, exactly.
Yeah. You mentioned supporting, extracting Jews who want to make Aliyah. You spoke about the hotline, emotional support. There is I think, a hidden detail about the work that you do, which pertains to assisting with safeguarding Jewish communities abroad. Can you elaborate a little bit about that?
Yes, exactly 10 years ago, in 2012, after the terror attack in Toulouse, France, in which people were murdered in a Jewish school, Otzar Torah, by a Muslim terrorist. And the Jewish agency established, at the behest of Nathan Sharansky, who was then chairperson of the Jewish community, of the Jewish agency, we have established a security assistance fund for communities around the world. And through this fund, we provide counseling and funding for a better, for the improvement of physical protection and safety of Jewish facilities, community centers, cultural centers, schools, etc., where needed. We're talking about installing surveillance cameras or armored doors or armored windows, and so on and so on. This became somewhat famous after I think 3 or 4 years ago, in the small German town of Halle, a terrorist tried to break into a synagogue while a prayer service was taking place. And he was prevented from entering the facility with his automatic weapons because he was viewed in the surveillance camera, and the security guard managed to shut the armored door just before he tried to break in. And he fired on the door, didn't manage to break the lock or break the door, and so turned back into the street, tragically fired at random, killing 2 people, but then was immediately apprehended by the police, and a massacre was prevented, because if he had entered the synagogue while it was full with people, you can only imagine what could have happened.
Right, and as tragically we've seen in the past. So how does that work? Do communities reach out to you asking for such support? Do you reach out to them? I mean,
so we make it known that we are there throughout community structures, and we take the initiative. We don't wait for people to call or to write. We take the initiative to let people know that we are there and we can provide this service and this funding. And then there are certain rules to send an application We examine the applications based on professional criteria, of course. And if the application is accepted, then we have an expert who is either in the field or is sent from Israel to survey the facility and provide professional and technical advice. And based on that, the funding will be given to a specific installation. The problem now in Ukraine is that we're talking about emergency.
Right.
We can't send an expert now to survey the facility. We can't send anyone. We need to rely on the application and on the advice of our staff on the ground. So we take that into account, and of course we do things more flexibly in order to provide safety, a greater safety to community facilities.
Whatever can be done to
Whatever
alleviate.
can be done, yes.
The waves of immigration, the thousands of people, the calls to the hotline, it's not just from the Ukraine. You also have been working with Russian Jews at the moment who may want to make Aliyah, correct?
Yes, no, we haven't opened a hotline for Russia because Russian Jews are not involved in the war.
Right.
But there is a growing interest of Jews from Russia. However, this is a highly sensitive issue, politically speaking.
Right.
So we don't communicate on it. But you're right to mention that many Russian Jews are now interested in making Aliyah at once. And we are prepared to respond to that need as well.
You standing outside, and we were just showing our viewers the big sign with the Ukrainian colors and the campaign called Torenu, Our Turn.
Our Turn, yes.
Can you share a little bit, because you mentioned the facilities on the borders of the Ukraine, you mentioned your incredible staff working from within to assist all of those in need. What's happening here in Israel when it comes to Our Turn?
So we believe, as I said, that we need to share with the general Ukrainian population and its plight, its terrible plight that needs to be alleviated. Even though it's not the core mission of the Jewish Agency, you can't be indifferent to what is happening there. So we joined forces with the Federation of Israeli Local Authorities and with the Kibbutzim movement. We are collecting humanitarian equipment based on concrete demands by humanitarian organizations
concrete demands.
In the field. Concrete demands. It's not just buy me some humanitarian stuff.
Right.
No, there's a list. And the list was made by foreign ministry staff who are on the ground collaborating with international humanitarian organizations and Polish authorities. We're talking Poland because that's where most of the refugees go. And that's where the biggest crisis is now. And the list consists of personal hygiene equipment, such as soap, shampoo, toothpaste, toilet paper, stuff like that. And then clothes for winter, coats, gloves, sleeping bags, everything the refugees need. And all of this is collected in the local authorities. 60 local authorities are participating, and like I said, also the Kibbutzim movement. Everything will be packed and shipped through our services in collaboration with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And once the humanitarian shipment gets to Poland, we will share it with the Polish authorities and again with Israeli diplomats who can go to the refugee camps and distribute it in an orderly manner.
So
according to the local
needs. The Jewish Agency and its role with Ukrainian refugees in general, truly inspirational.
The Jewish Agency, through its, directly and through its subsidiary, the Israeli Spirit, is channeling Israeli donations, Israeli humanitarian donations, to the larger population of Ukrainian refugees now stationed in Poland. Look, Jews have a painful history in Ukraine. That needs to be said. We can't forget our history. I'm not going to go right now over all the painful periods from the 17th century onwards, but Ukrainian nationalism was not very favorable to Jews. That is true. And one must admit that Ukraine has changed, because not only has it become truly democratic, as we have seen, they have democratically elected our government. There were troubles, of course, but the elections, when the elections took place, they were observed by by international observers, by European organizations. So they became democratic. They elected freely their leadership, and lo and behold, they elected the Jewish president.
Yeah. Correct.
And they used to have a Jewish prime minister. He was appointed, not elected. So you could always say, yeah, well, it's an accident. But once they have elected the Jewish president, now there's a Jewish minister of defense. And I mean, there haven't been any conspicuous anti-Semitic attacks in Ukraine in recent years. You must admit that Ukraine has changed. So from the general point of view of the Jewish people, I think that we have to take that into account. And besides, in such tragic times, we need to set aside all historical accounts and simply care and share with civilians who are in dire need of our assistance, of our help, of our open arms. We need to embrace those refugees, Jews and non-Jews alike. The world needs to do something for them. I will not say what I think the world needs to do politically, because I'm not in my position as a diplomat anymore, but I think really the international community should do more. And I will stop at that. But for the refugees, there is never enough that we can do for them. So from here, from Israel, from the Jewish Agency, we will do whatever we can. I hope the Israeli government will decide to increase the number of non-Jewish refugees that it admits into the country, and whatever we can do to alleviate the suffering of those refugees will be a good, I would say, a good implementation of lessons learned from our own history, from Jewish history.
Right. Let me conclude this by asking you something that I'm sure is on the minds of all of our viewers. If anyone wants to help, support your efforts, channel their support through the Jewish Agency, because you clearly know what you're doing and you have the right people on the ground, both within and without the Ukraine. Where should they go?
Well, donations are always welcome. You can connect to the Jewish Agency website, or through your local federation, or through Keren HaYesod, depending on the country in which you're residing, of course. So donations are always welcome. If you want to volunteer, I'm not sure there's anything you can do through the Jewish Agency from the US, but there are plenty of Jewish charities in your hometown, I'm sure, who may offer possibilities to volunteer. Right. And obviously, you can stay connected to the Jewish Agency to know what we're doing through our website, through our social media platforms. And if there's anything you see to which you want to contribute, well, you can enter into a dialogue with our people on social networks and tell us what you're offering.
I have to tell you that not only was I inspired by my conversation with you today, Yigal, I think to a large degree, as I'm sure so many of our viewers, I learned a lot. So thank you for sharing all of this, and thank you for the incredible work that the Jewish Agency does, and you specifically have done over the years for the State of Israel and for the Jewish people. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Shahar, and thank you to our viewers who are interested in this exceptional, tragically exceptional event. We all need to rise to meet this challenge together. And I'm talking about the Jewish communities around the world. I'm talking about the international community, about the Western world, democratic countries. We all need to do everything we can to put an end to this horrible tragedy.
Thank you, Yigal. And to our viewers, thank you for listening and tuning in. It's truly a fact that to make this world a better place, we shouldn't only look at our governments and leaders. It all starts from within and from ourselves. So check out the website of the Jewish Agency and check out how you can be a part of making this world a better place, in the hope that this war will end sooner rather than later. Thank you so much for watching, and all the best from Jerusalem, Israel.